Ladies and gentlemen, before we commence this afternoon, I would like you all to take a moment to turn off all electronic devices or switch them to flight mode so they are removed from accessing the outside world, and we can all maintain the reverence and dignity of such a solemn and somewhat difficult occasion. Thank you. If I could please ask you all to stand. afternoon. My name is Tony Scarcella and I have been given the honour of assisting Andrew's family to step their way through today's celebration of his life by way of this ceremony here at the Chapel of France Family Funerals. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no right or wrong way to deal with grief, and every person is different with what this actually means and what is expected from each one of you, whether you be a wife, an ex-partner, a child, a sibling. It's important that everyone is celebrated and remembered. Before we get to the formal part of today's proceedings, I'd like to pay tribute to Andrew's mum and dad, June Wright and Barry Gibbs, and the love with which they brought Andrew into this world. Also an apology from Andrew's uncle David, who cannot join us today for his own personal health reasons. The family has asked me to tell you a bit about Andrew Stephen Wright by way of this eulogy, and I'll do my best to tell Andrew's story. Paint his picture, if you will, thanks to the time that I've spent with the family and some close friends over the last couple of days. Andrew Stephen Wright was born on November 29, 1969 in Western Sydney and was the fourth child of Barry Gibbs and June Wright, who lived in a post-war weatherboard house in Pendle Hill with their children, Andrew's brothers and sisters, David, Liz, John and Paul. Growing up, Andrew attended Holy Trinity for his primary school years, and when he finished high school at Marist Brothers at Auburn, he continued his education at the University of New South Wales and finally started his working life as an intern at a company called Data3, where he continued to kick goals in his chosen field of data analysis and computer science. Andrew met his first wife, Karen, at Data3, and after a whirlwind romance, they got married in 1996. Not soon after, their lives became somewhat complete, with the birth of their first child, Jess, in 1998, followed closely by a second child, Emily, in 1999. Andrew loved being a dad, and really tried to be everything to his two girls, Jessica and Emily. Life got in the way a little bit of his relationship with Karen, and the two went their separate ways soon after Emily was born. That didn't stop Andrew from being a dad, and he took great pride in being a part of their lives at every opportunity he was given to be a parent. Karen also stayed in Andrew's life, and things went along their merry way as two parents that only wanted the best for their children. When Andrew and Karen separated, Andrew threw himself into his work and his love of sport. Specifically, cricket and motorsport. At times, his career and his love of sport crossed paths, and this is where Andrew really thrived. Working for Sydney Motorsport as a statistician and database manager, Andrew found his niche. Andrew was fortunate enough in life to find love for a second time, and from the moment they first laid eyes on each other, Susan and Andrew were inseparable. They were married in 2004. Andrew and Susan made Westmead their home, and not long after this day, Andrew found himself working with V8 supercars. And this was his life complete moment on all fronts until their son Ben was born in 2005. Working with the supercars was a dream come true for Andrew, and this made life one big adventure where he could rub shoulders with his heroes and really stand proud of the work that he did. Travelling the country with the competing teams, the season was a hectic affair, but the off-season was a great opportunity for Andrew to settle into his other passion, cricket. Andrew and his eldest brother David were cricket tragics. They knew everything there was to know about cricket. Every summer, the family would be dragged along to the one-dayers in their pink zinc war paint, Australian shirts, oversized floppy white hats, and they'd sit in the heat and watch Australia take on the might of the world. For the family, probably the most memorable cricket story that needs to be told at this time and place is the pilgrimage in 2010 to the Boxing Day test at the MCG. Andrew and David had everything planned out to the minute. They were flying down on the first available flight on Boxing Day, which was leaving Sydney at 5:30 a.m. They'd hired a private car to have them picked up and whisked away from Tullamarine to take them to the MCG, where they would view what was going to be the greatest test match in years between England and Australia. The Ashes, the Boxing Day test, the MCG. First mistake seemed to be that Christmas Day was the day before an early morning flight, and that meant setting an alarm to make sure that you got up in time to drive to the airport. To make this a bit easier, Andrew decided to stay at David's for the night, and we all know what happens when those two get together. A carton later, they slept through the alarm, hightailed it to the airport and up to the information desk at Qantas. Yep, they missed their flight. They couldn't get another flight until 4 p.m. in the afternoon. What to do? The boys decided Qantas could feed them and entertain them in the Qantas Club until their flight was ready to depart later that day, and with that they adjourned to the Qantas Club for a late breakfast and a hair of the dog to start their bodies on the long alcohol-fueled journey that was going to be in front of them. So for those of you that are not cricket people, just bear with me here for a minute whilst I quickly go through what happened on Boxing Day in 2010. The score after the first 3 completed tests was 1-1. One test was obviously drawn, and England had won the toss in the Boxing Day test and decided to bowl. After a steady start, Australia lost a couple of wickets and England were looking reasonably good. There was a rain delay in the middle of the afternoon, and this was very costly for the Australians, and they were bowled out for 98. It was at this point that the boys were ready to board their flight to Melbourne. Both were still fairly buoyant despite the misfortune of the Australian team, obviously, and looked forward to at least being in Melbourne for the next few days at the cricket. When the boys finally made it to Tullamarine, they checked their phones and realised that in the space of an hour and a bit, the England team had not only passed the 98 that Australia made, they hadn't dropped a wicket. The decision was made when they arrived at Tullamarine. There was no point going to the cricket today. Let's just go to our hotel room and hope and pray that tomorrow would be Australia's day in the field. Guess what? It wasn't. The Australians dropped catches, bowled pies all day, and England had things well under control, reaching 5 for 444 at the end of day 2, which was a lead of 346 runs. Bitterly disappointed in their heroes, David and Andrew went across to Crown Casino to drown their sorrows and pulled an all-nighter before staggering back to their hotel room at the break of dawn. Day 3 of the Ashes came and went, and whilst the boys both slept off their hangovers from the night before, Australia finally got the Poms out for 513 and then found themselves at 6 for 169 at the end of the day's play. The third match was all but over when day 4 came about. There was no point going, no point turning up. So David and Andrew decided to be tourists for the last 2 days in Melbourne on this eventful cricket trip. So there you have it. Andrew's only venture to cricket's holy grail, the Boxing Day test, and it's a story that he used to tell whenever a few beers were consumed. Andrew was very much a family-orientated person. Life on weekends was all about including his children in things that made everyone happy. Family time was always doing something at a motorsport track, an oval, or in the backyard with a few friends and a barbecue. In spite of all that has been mentioned here, Susan was Andrew's #1 priority. Nothing happened outside of work in Andrew's world without Susan having played a part in the organisation or the planning of every family event. The family spent lots of time together doing family things, and this will be where Andrew will be missed the most. Always known as the person with the bigger, better, brighter stories than anyone else, Uncle Andrew made sure that everyone heard what he had to say, and as a child in this extended family, it was always well received and talked about for days and days afterwards. Andrew had a really special way of making sure that his stories were always age appropriate, shall we say, and contained a message that could be taken away by all that listened. The family has asked that Andrew be remembered for his love of all things in his world, and that each person here today also remembers Andrew's favourite saying, which turned out to be something that he instilled in all three of his children. You can do whatever you want, but do it once and do it right. Wow. Obviously a few family favourites in that lot. A big thank you to everybody who contributed to the photographic tribute, and also to Jessica, Emily and Ben for piecing all of that together. I would now like to invite Andrew's brother John up to say a few words. Thank you, John, for your lovely tribute. If I can now please ask Andrew's daughter Jessica up to read a beautiful Linda Ellis poem that the family has decided to share on this day.
I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be arranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spend your dash? Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing that wonderful piece of work. It's actually one of my favourite poems. There's a lot that everybody can take out of that particular poem. Ladies and gentlemen, before we finish here today with one final point in time for a quiet reflection, which will be to one of Andrew's favourite songs, I've been asked to invite all of you to a private gathering at Sydney Motorsport, which is at Eastern Creek, for a few drinks and a light afternoon tea. If you make your way there at the end of this service, the family has also asked that you respect their privacy just for about an hour. They're going to attend to a private gathering before joining all of you at the venue. So thank you.